In the forgotten corners of Umuazala, a woman once called a seer now roams the village as a madwoman, mocked, feared, and left to rot in silence. But when children begin to vanish and a dark force rises from the river, the fate of the village rests in the hands of the very woman they cast aside. They said she was mad. Until her madness saved them all is a haunting African supernatural folktale of visions, shame, and redemption, where madness hides truth, and only the misunderstood can see the danger before it strikes. Hello friends, enjoy this relaxing moment with Valentino's stories. Remember to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments section, and generously hit the like button because it means a lot to us. Please relax and enjoy as we dive in the story. In the heart of Umuazala, a small village surrounded by forests and red earth roads, lived a woman everyone called mad. Her name was Obianuju, but most people had forgotten it. Children called her the Crazy One, and the elders shook their heads when they saw her. Every day, she sat under a crooked old tree beside the village's main footpath. Her hair was rough and tangled like dry grass. Her wrapper was full of patches, red, green, and brown, stitched with uneven hands. She always had a faraway look in her eyes, as if she was talking to spirits no one else could see. That afternoon, the sun was hot and dry wind blew across the village square. Children came running down the path, laughing and shouting. When they saw Obianuju sitting under the tree, they slowed down and began to tease her. "Mama says she used to be a seer. Now she sees nonsense," one boy shouted. Another girl picked up a small stick and threw it. It hit the ground near Obianuju's feet. "My uncle said she cursed his yam farm. That's why his crops failed," she yelled. Obianuju didn't react. She sat still, whispering to herself, her eyes on the sky. But suddenly, she stood up. Her thin arms stretched toward the heavens. Her voice was low but clear. "The river will cry tonight. The moon will not rise over Umuazala tonight." The children froze for a moment, then screamed and ran off, laughing and shouting that the mad woman was speaking in riddles again. A few adult villagers walking by stopped to listen. "What does a mad woman know about the river and moon?" said one man, shaking his head. "She is always speaking in parables. Leave her alone." "She lost her mind long ago," said a woman carrying a basket of cassava. Another woman whispered to her friend, "Her madness is not normal. I heard it came after something terrible happened in her past." But most people simply walked past, ignoring her warning. That night, the village grew quiet early. Chickens returned to their coops. Smoke rose gently from cooking fires. Children were called inside. But something felt different. The air was thick, like before a storm, even though the sky was clear. Around midnight, a scream pierced the air. "Nkem, Nkem, where is my son?" It was Mama Nkem, the mother of a playful 7-year-old boy. She had gone to check on him but found his bed empty. The family searched around the compound, calling his name, running through neighboring houses. There was no answer. Then someone found the boy's small sandals at the edge of the river. The water flowed calmly, but there was no sign of Nkem. Mama Nkem fell to the ground, tearing at her clothes and crying, "My son! My only son!" Villagers gathered, holding lanterns and torches. They searched the banks, calling into the night, but the boy was gone. Some said he drowned. Others said something had taken him. But nobody knew for sure. By morning, the entire village was in panic. This was the third child to disappear in just 2 moons. The people were afraid. Whispers filled the air like smoke. The elders called a meeting under the ancient Irako tree. It was a sacred place where important matters were discussed. Everyone came, women with babies on their backs, old men leaning on walking sticks, young people listening quietly. Elder Okari, a tall man with gray hair and deep wrinkles, stood up. "This is not ordinary," he said. 3 children are gone. We must accept that something is wrong. The gods may be angry." There was silence for a moment. Then, a young woman spoke from the side. "Obianuju said something yesterday. She said the river would cry and the moon would not rise. I heard it with my own ears. Others were there too." The crowd began to murmur. Some nodded slowly, remembering. Others looked uneasy. Mama Nkem stood up, her eyes red from crying. "It's her. That mad woman. She's behind this. She knew something would happen. Maybe she caused it. Another elder tried to calm her. Let us not jump to conclusions, Maman Kem, he said. She is not well. She says many things. But Maman Kem refused to be silent. My son is gone. If she knew, why didn't she stop it? She is dangerous. People looked at each other. Fear was spreading. Yet, nobody moved to question Obianuju. Despite their suspicions, they were afraid, not just of her, but of what they might discover. Obianuju sat alone in her small hut at the edge of the village, humming softly to herself, as if nothing had happened. The village of Umuazala would never be the same again. The air in Umuazala grew tense. The elders' words did little to calm the people. Everyone watched their children more closely, locking doors earlier, avoiding the river. But despite their fear, the village carried on. Women still went to the market. Farmers still went to the fields. And children, full of energy, still played when they could, though not too far from home. Then, it happened again. Another child disappeared. This time, it was a girl named Ifyananya. She had gone to fetch firewood near the edge of the forest and never returned. Her mother found only her broken headscarf tangled in some low bushes. Panic spread like wildfire. But instead of blaming Obianuju again, the villagers turned their anger on someone else, Maman Kem. You wailed and cursed the night your boy went missing, one woman shouted. You brought more evil to us. Your mouth is bitter. You cry to the sky. Maybe the spirits listened and answered wrongly, another man added. Before long, a crowd formed around Maman Kem's compound. Words turned into shouts. Then, hands turned into fists. They dragged her out into the open, tore her wrapper, and beat her. The poor woman screamed, begging for help, but her voice was buried in anger and confusion. By the time the elders arrived, her body was covered in bruises, and her lips were bleeding. Stop this madness! Elder Motsi Chuka shouted. This will not solve anything. The crowd backed away. Ashamed, some turned their faces. Others muttered under their breath and disappeared into the shadows. Maman Kem was helped into her house by a few kind neighbors, but her soul was shattered. First her son, then her peace. That same day, a figure appeared at the entrance of the village. She was a young woman, dressed in jeans and a long blouse. Her hair was braided, her face clean and tired from travel. She pulled a small bag behind her and looked around, confused. The trees, the huts, the dusty air, everything was familiar, yet distant. Her name was Amaka. It had been many years since she left Umuazala. She had not planned to return so soon, but something had pulled her back. A feeling, a longing, a dream. She walked slowly through the village until she reached the crooked tree near the footpath. And there, sitting in the same position as always, was the woman in rags, her mother. Obianuju sat with her back against the tree, legs crossed, humming a soft tune to herself. Her eyes were half closed, as if watching something others couldn't see. Amaka's heart skipped. "Mama," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Obianuju slowly looked up. For a moment, there was silence. Then she smiled, softly, almost shyly. The moon returns with her child, but the child has shadows in her bag. Amaka's breath caught in her throat. The voice was the same, but the words were strange. Still, somehow, her mother had recognized her. Tears filled Amaka's eyes as she knelt before her mother. "Mama, it's me. It's Amaka. I've come home." Obianuju reached out and touched her daughter's face gently. Her fingers were rough, her nails dirty, but the touch was full of love. Without another word, Amaka helped her mother stand. She held her close, shocked by how thin and fragile she had become. Back at the old hut where Obianuju lived, Amaka fetched water, removed the dirty rags, and carefully bathed her mother. She gasped when she saw the bruises. "Mama, who did this to you?" she asked in a broken voice. Obianuju said nothing. She only stared at the ceiling and smiled. That night, the rain came suddenly. Soft at first, then heavy. Amaka lit a lantern and looked for her mother, but Obianuju was not in the hut. She ran outside, and found her. Obianuju was standing in the middle of the rain, arms raised, her head tilted back, whispering softly into the storm. Let the wind carry the names. Let the river return what it took. Amaka stood frozen at the door, watching. She had returned to find her mother. But she was beginning to wonder, had she also returned to find the truth? Amaka didn't sleep much that night. Her mother's strange behavior under the rain kept playing in her mind. The words Obianuju spoke made no sense, yet they felt important. Amaka wanted answers, but she knew she couldn't get them on her own. Early the next morning, she helped her mother into a clean wrapper and tied a scarf around her tangled hair. She was determined to help her, truly help her. There was only one place to go. The village healer, Mama Ejima, was known for curing strange illnesses and calming restless minds. Her small hut stood at the edge of the village, shaded by tall bamboo trees and decorated with cowries and clay pots. Amaka held her mother's hand tightly as they approached the hut. "Please, just be calm, Mama. Maybe she can help you," she whispered. Inside, the healer sat grinding herbs on a flat stone. The moment she looked up and saw Obianuju, her eyes widened. "Get out!" Her voice cracked like thunder. Amaka froze. "Please, That is not your mother. That is a curse walking with 2 legs," the healer screamed, rising to her feet. "Leave this place now before you bring death to my doorstep." Obianuju didn't react. She just stared at the healer with a small smile. Amaka's face turned red with shame. Tears stung her eyes as she turned around and helped her mother walk away. Outside, a few women had gathered, watching the scene. Some whispered. Others laughed behind their hands. "She went to the healer with that mad woman? Oh, the shame!" Amaka said nothing. Her heart was heavy. She had tried. She only wanted her mother to be well again. But even the doors of healing were now closed. Later that afternoon, the skies turned gray again. Obianuju wandered out into the village square barefoot, her wrapper soaked, her hair flying in the wind. She spoke in riddles as the rain fell. "The river's mouth is opening. Its teeth are sharp. The spirits rise when no one is watching." People saw her and laughed. Some mocked her. Others ignored her completely. One woman selling okra nearby shook her head. "She's talking to herself again. At least the rain will wash her madness away." But a few people began to wonder, why was she always talking about the river? The next morning, a car rolled into the village. It was dusty from the long trip. The door opened and a tall young woman stepped out, wearing a fine gown and holding a leather bag. Her name was Afamafuna, daughter of the village leader, Chief Anazi. She had returned from the city without warning. "Papa!" she called out as she walked toward the chief's house. Chief Anazi came out with a bright smile. "Afamafuna, my daughter. You didn't tell me you were coming." "I wanted to surprise you," she said, hugging him. They talked for a long time. She asked about the village. He told her about the missing children. His voice grew heavy as he explained how the people were afraid. "We don't know who or what is behind it. But one thing is clear, madness has brought misfortune to this village." That evening, the village square was full. Drums beat softly as people gathered around Chief Anazi. Smoke from firewood twisted in the air. The chief stood on a raised platform and lifted his hand for silence. "In 3 days, the harvest festival will begin," he announced. "We shall offer thanks to the spirits of our land. But I must give a warning, let no one speak of the cursed woman. Let her name not pass your lips. She does not belong to this land anymore." Some nodded. Others exchanged glances. Afamafuna stood quietly, her eyes scanning the crowd. Something about her father's words unsettled her. She didn't know why, but her heart felt heavy, as if the land itself was holding its breath. That night, Afamafuna lay in her room, tossing and turning. The wind howled outside, and the palm trees scraped the roof of her father's house. She tried to sleep, but her body was restless. When she finally drifted off, her dreams turned dark. She found herself standing by the river. The water was black and still. Mist covered everything. Then, from the mist, a tall figure formed. It was smoky and faceless, but it moved like a person. Slowly, it reached out a hand toward her. Afamafuna tried to run, but her feet sank into the muddy ground. The figure grabbed her arm and pulled. She screamed. It dragged her toward the water. The river opened like a mouth, and just as she was about to fall in, she woke up. Her heart pounded in her chest. Sweat covered her face, and she sat up gasping for breath. She looked around the room, trying to calm herself. It was still dark, but she could hear the early cries of roosters in the distance. Outside, Obianuju was already awake. She walked the paths of the village, waving her hands and shouting strange warnings. "Stay away from the river. The water has grown hungry. It is no longer safe." People heard her, but they shook their heads. "She's at it again. Always crying about the river," one man muttered. "Madness has no end," a woman selling yams said. No one listened. By late morning, the sun was hot and strong. At the river, a group of villagers gathered. They were washing clothes, fetching water, and bathing. Some laughed and splashed each other, happy to enjoy the cool water on such a hot day. Afamafuna went with them. She didn't tell her father. She just needed some fresh air to clear her mind after the nightmare. She smiled and greeted a few familiar faces, then removed her slippers and stepped into the shallow part of the river. But then, something changed. The water, calm moments before, began to ripple. It moved in circles, faster and faster. Then, without warning, it turned dark. A glowing light rose from the middle, bright but strange, almost like the color of fireflies at night. People began to panic. "What's happening?" someone shouted. "The water. It's pulling me in," a young man cried. Screams echoed as one by one, villagers were dragged into the river. No one could escape. Afamafuna tried to run, but the current grabbed her legs and pulled her down. Her scream was the last sound the river swallowed. Minutes later, 2 village boys who had stayed by the trees ran as fast as they could to Chief Anazi's compound. Their feet slapped the dusty ground, their mouths dry from fear. "Chief! Chief!" Chief Anazi rushed outside, alarmed. "What is it?" "It's Afamafuna. She's gone. The river. It took her." His face lost all color. "My daughter," he whispered, staggering back. Without a word, he ran toward the river. When he arrived and saw the abandoned clothes, the disturbed water, and the fear in the eyes of the few who had escaped, he fell to his knees and cried. "This is Obianuju's doing," he shouted. "At sunrise, she leaves this land forever." The sky was still a pale gray when people began to gather at the river. The news had spread quickly. Chief Anazi had declared that Obianuju must be driven out of the village at sunrise. Many came out of curiosity, others came to support the chief, and a few came because of fear. The river, once calm, now looked strange. The surface was still, but it felt alive, like something was watching from beneath. Then they saw her. Obianuju walked slowly down the slope toward the water. Her clothes were clean for once, tied properly around her waist. Her hair, though still wild, was pushed back from her face. She looked different, calm, focused, like a woman with a mission. People began to whisper, "Is that really her? She looks strong. Not mad." Chief Anazi stepped forward with anger in his eyes. "You dare return here after what you've caused? You've brought sorrow to this land." But Obianuju's voice surprised them all. "I came not to fight, but to set things right." There was a long silence. Even the birds in the trees seemed to stop singing. Chief Anazi stared at her, stunned. She had spoken clearly. Her voice was steady, nothing like the confused mumblings they were used to. Obianuju walked closer to the river. The water began to move. Small ripples turned into waves. A strange mist began to rise from its surface. Then, with a loud roar, the river exploded upward, sending water into the sky. From the center rose a figure made of shadows and smoke. Its eyes glowed red, and its voice shook the ground. "Who dares disturb my reign?" People screamed and stepped back. Mothers grabbed their children. Some tried to run but couldn't move. It was as if the very air had turned to stone. Obianuju didn't flinch. "You've taken what is not yours," she said, her arms outstretched. "Today, I send you back." The spirit snarled. Its voice was deep and sharp like broken glass. "You are weak, mad woman. You are nothing. The spirit rushed toward her like a wave, clawing with long smoky fingers. It knocked her to the ground. The crowd gasped. But Obianuju stood back up. Her body was shaking, but her face remained calm. She raised her hands again, drawing invisible patterns in the air. Light shimmered around her fingertips. She whispered words no one else could understand. The spirit screamed as a beam of light burst from her palms and hit it in the chest. It staggered backward, its form shaking. "This land is protected," she said. "You cannot feed on fear anymore." The spirit roared and sent a dark wind across the riverbank. Dust and leaves flew everywhere. Villagers covered their faces and ducked behind trees and rocks. Still, Obianuju stood. She stepped into the shallow part of the river. The water around her glowed. She raised both hands, her voice louder now. "By the ancestors who walked this land, by the spirits of light who guard our people, I command you, leave this place." With a final scream, she struck the spirit again. The ground shook. The spirit began to unravel, like smoke in the wind. It howled, its voice fading as it disappeared into the water. Silence. Only the sound of the river, now calm again, remained. People slowly stood. Some wept. Others simply stared, unable to believe what they had seen. Obianuju stood in the river, breathing heavily. But she was still standing. Strong, clear, whole. And in that moment, the people realized. The woman they had called mad was not mad at all. She was the only one who had truly seen. Amaka paced around the hut, calling out softly, "Mama, where are you?" There was no reply. The bed was empty, and her mother's wrapper was gone. The quiet of the morning gave her an uneasy feeling. Something wasn't right. She stepped outside, asking a woman passing by if she had seen Obianuju. The woman looked startled. "Did you not hear? They say there is a battle happening at the river. The mad woman is facing a spirit." Amaka's eyes widened. Without another word, she took off running. Her slippers kicked up red dust as she hurried down the narrow path, past the farms and the old palm trees. Her chest pounded, not just from the running, but from fear. She didn't know what she would find. When she reached the river, she froze. Dozens of villagers stood in a circle. Some were kneeling, others hiding behind tree trunks and boulders. All eyes were fixed on the water. There, in the center of the river, was Obianuju. She looked nothing like the woman Amaka had bathed just days ago. Her body glowed faintly with a soft golden light. Her hands moved like they were pulling power from the air. The dark spirit before her was already fading, its smoky body twisting in pain. Amaka stepped forward, heart pounding. "Mama!" she called, barely believing what she was seeing. Just then, Obianuju raised her hands and let out a final scream. A brilliant light shot from her body and struck the spirit one last time. The air grew still. The river, once wild, calmed. A hush fell over the land. Then, bubbling, gentle waves broke the surface of the water. From its depth, slowly, figures began to rise. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Afamafuna, her eyes closed but breathing. Nkem, coughing and confused. Then others, boys and girls, villagers who had vanished without a trace. One by one, the missing were returned. Women screamed with joy. Men dropped to their knees. The children were carried out, their bodies weak but alive. Chief Anazi pushed through the crowd. His eyes locked onto Afamafuna. He stumbled toward her and dropped beside her, pulling her into his arms. "You're alive, my daughter, you're alive," he whispered, weeping. On the other side, Mom Kem saw her son and ran forward, falling to her knees and holding him tightly. "Thank you, oh thank you," she cried, pressing his face to hers. Around them, voices whispered in awe. She saved them. Obianuju saved them. No one laughed at her now. No one threw stones or called her mad. Their eyes were full of shame and respect. Amaka pushed through the crowd and ran straight to her mother. "Mama!" she cried, holding her tightly. "Are you all right?" Obianuju looked into her daughter's eyes. Her expression had changed. The confusion was gone. Her mind was clear. She reached out and gently touched Amaka's cheek. "I remember now, my child," she said softly. "The pain, the loss, the blame. I'm sorry for everything." Tears ran down Amaka's face as she held her mother's hand. "No, Mama. It was never your fault. I'm just glad you're back." Obianuju nodded and rested her forehead against her daughter's. Around them, the river flowed gently once again. The villagers had seen a miracle. But more than that, they had seen the truth they had buried for years under fear and pride. A woman they had thrown aside had become their deliverer. And in her quiet strength, Obianuju had not only brought back their children, she had brought back their hope. The morning after the river battle, the village of Umuazala was silent. Not from fear, but from deep reflection. The birds still chirped, the wind still moved gently through the trees, but the people said very little. They had seen something they could not explain. They had watched a woman they once laughed at stand face to face with a spirit of darkness. They had witnessed the return of their children. And now, they didn't know how to make things right. By mid-morning, a message had spread across the village. Chief Anazi had called for a gathering at the village square. Slowly, the people came. Families arrived in silence. Children clung to their mothers. Even the elders, proud and firm in their ways, walked with bowed heads. At the center of the square, beneath the towering irako tree, stood Obianuju, no longer dressed in rags. She wore a clean wrapper and a simple head tie. Her face was calm. Her hands were folded in front of her. Amaka stood beside her, her hand gently resting on her mother's arm. The crowd circled around them. Chief Anazi stepped forward, his walking staff firm in the red earth. His voice shook, not from weakness, but from emotion. "People of Umuazala," he began, "yesterday we witnessed the impossible. A spirit rose from our river. Our children were taken. And yet, they were returned." He looked at Obianuju, then slowly turned to the crowd. "We owe our lives to this woman. We judged her. We mocked her. We left her to suffer while she carried a gift we did not understand." No one moved. Some villagers covered their faces in shame. "Today, we honor her," Chief Anazi said. "Today, we correct our wrong." He dropped to his knees before her. Gasps rose from the people. The village chief, on his knees. One by one, the elders followed. Then the hunters. Then the women. Soon, the entire village knelt before Obianuju and Amaka. Their voices rose in apologies. Some cried. Others spoke gently. "Forgive us," an old woman whispered. "We didn't know." "We are sorry," a young man said. "We should have listened." Obianuju looked at them. Her eyes held no anger. She nodded slowly. "You are forgiven." The people stood, and one by one, they embraced her. She was no longer a stranger. No longer the mad woman. She was their healer, their protector. Later that day, the villagers returned to the crooked irako tree where Obianuju had always sat. 4 years, it had been a place of shame and gossip. But now, they cleaned the area, swept the ground, and placed flowers and stones around its base. A wooden sign was hung on the trunk. It read, "Where wisdom once sat in silence." Children were told to respect the tree, to never mock again. The stories of Obianuju would be passed down, not as a tale of madness, but of truth. That evening, Amaka and Obianuju sat outside their hut, watching the sunset. The sky was golden, soft, and wide. For the first time in many years, peace rested on Obianuju's shoulders like a shawl. "You were never mad, Mama," Amaka said quietly. "They just didn't understand." Obianuju smiled, her eyes watching the sky. Sometimes, the ones who see the most are the ones the world calls mad. And so it was. The woman they once feared became the woman they trusted. The one they shunned became the one they honored. And Umuazala, forever changed, learned that not every voice that speaks differently is broken. Some carry the truth, waiting for the world to listen. The end.